I'm Mary.
And I'm Katie, and this is The Housewife Did It. Brought to you
Our
by
first ever.
Mary.
Yes. Yeah. So obviously this is our first true crime episode. And so we wanted to just take suggestions to begin with. And a friend of ours from high school suggested that we talk about Ed Buck. And specifically I said, what do you want me to talk about? He said, honestly, I just want him to burn for what he's done. So
We can't do that.
I knew who Ed Buck was. But yeah, the details, I just want to give a content warning because of the details. It's heavy on sexual assault, drug usage, and situations with overdose. But yeah, if you're ready, I can get into it.
Okay. I am ready.
All right. So, when I started looking into this case, I really wanted to make sure that I focused on the victims and the survivors, and less on Ed Buck, because I feel like a lot of people haven't heard of this case, but I feel like if you have heard Ed Buck's name and no one else's. So I wanted to tell it with how he got caught and then kind of backtrack to how it started. And you'll see when we get to the end, even after people died, he was still doing this. And his final victim thankfully was a survivor, and he is asked to be identified as a doe, so there's really not a lot of information on his situation with Ed Buck, and so it's just really not gonna be able to tell it that way, because there's just not a lot of information on him and anyone who came after Timothy Dean. It took a really long time to get justice for Gemmel Moore and Timothy Dean, is another thing that's gonna be hard to tell it that way. So instead, I'm gonna start with who Ed Buck is, and then kind of get into what he was doing. But I think it's really important to identify who he was, because it is a heavy player in why it took so long to get justice, and how he got away with it for as long as he did. So yeah,
Let's do it.
Buck Melter was born on August 24th, 1954 in Steubenville, Ohio, but he grew up in Phoenix, Arizona. He came out as gay to his parents when he was 16 years old and changed his last name from Buck Melter to Buck. Early into his adulthood, he became a model, actor, and businessman. He bought a company called Rapid Information Services out of bankruptcy from a friend. He paid $250,000 for it. Then he renamed it Gopher Courier, and in 5 years he sold it and became a millionaire.
How did he get $250,000? Is this family money, or?
I think he was already getting into modeling and acting and working in the business world. I don't know exactly how he got that specific money, but he's clearly good at business, because in 5 years he sold it for millions of dollars. So
okay,
I don't really know exactly, but he was interested in politics and was affiliated with the Republican Party until 1986. And then he led the effort to recall Governor Evan Meacham from Arizona. He founded the Meacham Watchdog Committee in December 1986, before Meacham had even been sworn into office. Ed Buck was like, no, not this guy. Because he said that... Sorry. He accused Meacham of racism and corruption, and on the day of his inauguration, Ed Buck led a protest, passing out bumper stickers that read "Meacham for ex-governor." And he
Interesting.
also talked about, at that protest, some of the things that really bothered him were that Meacham was opposed to celebrating Martin Luther King Jr. Day as a national holiday.
Rude.
Yeah. He also had a proposal for voluntary drug testing, and he planned to reduce the police force by up to 300 officers.
This is
Which it feels like
Meacham.
those, yeah,
Yeah, these don't.
it feels like those things don't really go together.
Not in 2023, at least.
No, but all of those things, in Ed Buck's opinion, would not have made him a good governor. So he was like protesting to get him recalled before he was even sworn in. And because of that, Ed Buck kind of became a household name in Arizona. He was like a local celebrity, and a lot of people really backed him, but there were also a lot of people giving him backlash, mostly because he was a gay man involved in the Republican Party. So the Arizonans for Traditional Family Values attacked him for that. And at that point, he switched his party affiliation to Democratic. In 1989, he served as the Grand Marshal for the International Gay Rodeo.
Cute! Okay, sorry, not cute in the end, but
Yeah,
kind of
no.
cute.
And in 1991, he moved to West Hollywood, California, and served on the Stonewall Democratic Committee.
He went straight for it.
Yeah,
Left the Republican Party, and he was like, shoo!
Yeah. Until his arrest, he donated over $500,000 to different Democratic campaigns. He also ran himself for a city council position in WeHo in 2007, which he ultimately lost. So at this point, he is like kind of a small-time political celebrity. If you Google Ed Buck, there a lot of the pictures that will come up are like of him in court, but you'll also see pictures of him with like Hillary Clinton and other like significant Democratic candidates that he donated money to. And because of that, he like clearly had a lot of power within the gay community, and he was someone whose status could do a lot for him. One of the sources that I looked into was a documentary called Beyond Ed Buck, and they pointed out that in the 70s and 80s, WeHo and Santa Monica Boulevard became sort of safe haven for gay men. So a lot of gay and trans people moved there in search of like acceptance. And like in Los Angeles, like people go there for like a big break in like acting, modeling, or whatever. And so a lot of people go there without a job, like looking for a job. It's a very high cost of living in Los Angeles, and so there's a very high rate of homelessness. So a lot of the LGBT people moving to WeHo began to do sex work as a way of paying for their necessities until they were able to get a stable job. And unfortunately, Ed Buck was someone who was taking advantage of that and abusing the vulnerable members of the LGBT community in the area to get what he wanted out of people who he knew like needed help. So
gross. Yucky.
Dating back,
Yucky.
Yeah. Dating back to at least 2011 and possibly earlier, Ed Buck was known to host what he called party and play events in his WeHo apartment. He would invite young gay black men to his home and offer to pay them for sex, and then he would ply them with narcotics.
Is there a reason? Is there a reason he only liked black men?
I'll get into.
Or we're getting there later.
The things he says, but
for now, no.
It's just like a fetish he had of like. Yeah, I'll get into like the power dynamic. but
yeah. Okay.
yeah. So he knew that a lot of the men he was inviting into his home homeless or had struggled with drug addictions. And so then it was like even more difficult for them to decline the money he was offering because like they really needed money. And so they got kind of put into this loop of staying high and staying with him, and like it was really difficult for them to get out of it, and he knew that. And during the parties he would distribute methamphetamines, GHB, which is the date rape drug, steroids, Viagra, Cialis, and clonazepam. He would also inject the drugs intravenously to the men that came to his parties. He would find them mostly on social media or on dating websites, but he did offer finder's fees to other men who had been to his parties if they referred other people to him.
Okay.
And then when he would lure them back to his apartment, he would prepare syringes and inject his victims with or without their consent. If they did consent to doing the drugs, he would often give them more than they agreed to take and would inject them again once they were unconscious. Many victims reported that he would lace their drugs or drinks with sedatives in addition to like the narcotics he was giving them, and then sexually assault them once they were unconscious. So that's kind of like general overview of what he was doing.
From reports from survivors?
Yes.
Okay. So there were more survivors than just that last person. The doe person. Okay.
A lot.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's like kind of the general overview of what was going on, but I have like several survivor stories that I'm gonna tell now with like details, and then get into the deaths that happened.
Okay.
But so these are like specific accounts of men that were interviewed who explained like their whole story. So one man named Jermaine Gagnon, he was 28, reported that Ed Buck offered him $200 for sex and paid for him to fly into LA from Minnesota. When he got in, Ed Buck drugged his Gatorade and then injected him with crystal meth. He also was able to provide photos of Ed Buck standing over him while he lay on a mattress with a large red toolbox of sex toys in front of him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, what a nice piece of evidence to have, though.
Yeah. I mean, and he's not the only one that had pictures and videos. Which is why it's like so frustrating that it took so long for something to get done about this.
Yeah, and like how are they allowed to hold on to these photos? Like you'd think you're committing crimes against people, you're like, don't fucking take my picture.
Yeah.
But never.
Yeah. Jermaine stated that he met Buck at his apartment and that when he walked into the apartment, the lights were dim, but that there was a mattress on the living room floor, 3 7-foot mirrors surrounding the sides of the mattress, and a TV in front of the other side. The windows were covered so that no one could see in or out of them. And Jermaine said that he would go back to see Buck and receive more money in exchange for sex, and that each time he went to Ed Buck's apartment, he said that the atmosphere was darker and more intense. Buck would make him change his clothes, try different methods of taking drugs, and would only allow Jermaine to have the drugs if Buck could administer them. Another victim, survivor, known as Blake, reported that he learned of Ed Buck while he was in prison. A man that was incarcerated with him told him that Buck hung out around Santa Monica Boulevard, and he said that if Blake was able to meet Ed Buck, that he would be good to him.
So, word is getting around because, they're letting their friends know, like, this is a good source of income. Like, this
Yes,
man
like
will give you money.
yes, when he says like he'll be good to you, like they were talking about like the pay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, once he was released from prison, Blake did find himself around Santa Monica Boulevard. He was selling drugs outside of a small porn shop, and he met Ed Buck. At the time, he didn't even realize that it was Ed Buck. That this was like the person that the other inmate had told him about. But then he was soon in Buck's car negotiating pricing and exchanges for party and play. Prior to meeting Ed Buck, Blake had tried smoking meth once and he decided he didn't want to try it again. But once Ed Buck had kind of weaseled his way into Blake's life, he was using it again. According to Jasmine Canick's writing, Blake explained that the prices Buck was willing to pay were good, and that Blake was never expected to have sex with Buck, which made it even easier to agree to. He would later learn, though, that he was getting paid less than the other people who were coming to the parties.
Because he wasn't having sex?
Probably. I will say, though, like, the first man that I talked about, Jermaine, he said that he got $200 to flying in from Minnesota. And then there was someone else who said that they got like $800 and somebody else got like $2,000, and like the pay was just very uneven.
What he can get away with.
Yes.
Basically.
Like, yeah. So, according to Blake, when he came into Buck's apartment, you would see a red light at the end of the hall that Buck referred to as the gates of hell.
Ew.
Yeah.
Terrifying.
Yeah. Blake confirmed Jermaine's accounts of the red toolbox and said that it was filled with drugs and sex toys. And he also confirmed that Buck would force his victims to change into specific underwear, tank tops, and pants. And the specifics were like tidy whities, wife beaters, and like thermal pants.
Do we think this is like more fetish work, or is this like for some sort of like evidence? Like they don't need to have their own clothes on?
It was fetish because he would take pictures of them.
Ah, okay.
This part is like really sad. But Blake also pointed out that it was unclear how many people were made to wear the same articles of clothing after one another. That like it seemed like he just had them, he would give them, and then when that person left, he would just throw them back in and give them to someone else.
Yeah, I think it's fair to assume he's not buying fresh clothing for everyone.
Yeah. He also said that people's like own clothes would be dropped and kind of strewn across the living room and kitchen, and that Buck would barricade the door so that no one could enter the apartment. Blake reported that Buck would call his victims the N-word, crack babies. He called a few of them black boy. Blake said that specifically that he would call him like his little straight friend.
Interesting.
And like other derogatory names.
So is this like happening, and again this may come up later, but is this happening like one person at a time at all times? At first I was picturing like a Hugh Hefner setup.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
I really don't know, because the way some of them talk about it, it does seem like there's more than one person in the apartment at each time. But then also the way some others talk about it, like there's no one there with them. And then especially when we get into like Gemmel's death, Um, like it really seemed like he was the only person in that apartment.
Okay.
At the time.
Okay.
So I don't really know, but I think maybe a little bit of both.
Okay. And the racism has entered the chat.
He would put cock rings on them while they slept.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. He only allowed them to eat vegan food, which like doesn't necessarily sound bad on its own, but basically like while they were staying with him, because he was a vegan, and he would tell them like, well, if you don't want to eat it, then you don't eat.
Yeah.
Like he would not provide any other food for them.
Were they staying with
and he would let them
him?
leave.
Were they? Yeah, I was gonna say. Were they? How long was he keeping these people?
He was like, they said that he would like barricade the door, so they couldn't get out. And one of them talks about like that he was able to get out, but like it was very difficult to like get out because he would keep their stuff.
Yeah.
From them, and like they would be high, and like it was Blake also said that he often wouldn't pay the money he agreed to, and that in one particular encounter with Buck, for Blake, he woke up in Ed Buck's apartment with his arm red, and he said that he knew he had been shot up with meth. He said he felt like his arm wouldn't work at all, so he went to lay down and see if it would just like pass, but he sweated all through the night, and eventually he realized that he did he was going to need to go to the hospital, so he called an ambulance to take him to the hospital. Buck followed him to the hospital, and even after that, like Blake still really needed money, and so he continued meeting with Buck and doing drugs with him to get payments. But toward the end of their like relationship, not like romantic relationship, but like I guess like business relationship, their interactions with one another, Blake said that the police were called because Buck was holding his belongings in the apartment, and he was trying to leave, and like he could not get his things back. But when the police got there, they searched Blake instead, and they found drugs on him, and they arrested him. He went to prison. He said that ultimately he didn't report Buck's crimes because he really needed the money. He didn't have a place to live, and so like this was the only way he was getting money and having a place to sleep. But I also think that like once the police were called, like look what happened. Like Blake was the one who was searched and sent to prison.
Yeah, and if that wasn't Ed Buck's intention to begin with, he's certainly now aware that that's how it'll go.
Yeah, exactly. All of these survivors that I'm talking about were interviewed by a woman named Jasmine Canick. Okay. She like was like really like the number one reporter on this. She's who originally posted Gemmel Moore's diary entries, and she did all of these interviews. So another survivor that interviewed with her, his name was Damar Love. He explained that he would get money from Buck just to have photos taken. At the time of the story, he told Jasmine he had just begun working a steady security job. So he agreed to meet with Buck, but he told him, like, I'm very tired. I just want to have photos taken. You can do that, and then, like, I'm leaving. And he told him, like, that he was really in a hurry, that, like, we need to take these pictures and get a move on. And he told Jasmine that the reason he was so rushed was because like he did not want to fall asleep in front of Ed Buck. Like he knew that was not a safe thing to do, so he was trying to go quick and get out of there. After the photos were taken, he asked Buck for a glass of water, and he said that like he felt like if I ask for water, I'll be able to see if he put something in it, because it's clear and it's not carbonated. Like I'll like clearly be able to see what is in this water. And so he got his water, and he said that, like, the moment he took a sip, he felt, like, a tingling sensation. And he said, like, in his interview, he's like, what kind of water makes your body tingle?
Yeah.
And so he knew something wasn't right. The next thing he knew, he was waking up tied to Ed Buck's couch. He had a severe pain in his arm. And when he looked up, he saw Buck standing in the hallway holding a flashlight with a taser on it.
Okay.
So I guess he got untied somehow. It just kind of jumps from, like, he was tied to the couch to now he's looking for a weapon.
Okay.
And he found a flashlight under the couch that also had a taser on it.
Wow.
This is a standard for Ed Buck's flashlights, I guess.
Yeah.
So he said, like, it's kind of like they were in a standoff with their flashlight tasers. And then he later pointed out that, like, after he learned about the men who died in that apartment, that he was, like, really lucky because, like, in that moment, like, it could have been him. Like, it was so scary in general, but, like, especially after the fact, like, realizing, like, how serious that situation was. So he got out of the apartment after the standoff, and he went to the WeHo sheriff station. He told them, like, I'm coming from the home of an older friend. He's, like, trying to be kind of vague about it, but that he thought he had been drugged. And the police basically told him, like, you're obviously high, and so, like, we're not gonna, like, you can either get arrested or you can leave.
Yep.
And he's like,
the highness is part of what I'm telling you.
Yeah, he's like, I fucking know I'm high. That's why I'm here.
Hello.
That's the problem. I didn't try to be high, and now I am. Do you see the?
Isn't that so weird that I'm high when I didn't want to be?
I'm trying to fucking tell you. So he really, like, stood up for himself, though, and he was like, I want to write this statement down. Like, something happened to me, and I need you to listen. And so he finally convinced them to give him a piece of paper to write a statement and a phone number down. And then they were like, okay, goodbye, leave. And so he left, and he went to a different police station. He was like, I'm gonna try again. And the same thing happened, pretty much. They were like, get out of here. So he got on, and this whole time, like, keep in mind, he is high.
Yeah.
Because he was drugged. He had been tied to a couch, and, like, not only was he drugged, like, his drink was drugged, but then he had been shot up with meth. So, like, he is really not well.
Yeah. And how did he eventually get out?
He said that, like, with the flashlight thing, like, Ed Buck ultimately was, like, a weak man.
Oh,
and so
right.
He got that flashlight, and he was like, never mind, sorry.
Oh, you can leave.
Yeah. Yeah. So he ended up on a bus after the police stations, and then he was finally able to get on an ambulance.
Okay.
Again, like, these are people, survivors, retelling their stories to a reporter.
There are gaps.
Yeah, and, like, also, like, as we've established, he had been drugged. So he ended up on an ambulance. And we got on the ambulance. The EMT actually did believe him. And so he took him to the hospital, and he was able to get him help and, like, get him his system clean and everything. And DeMar ultimately was able to escape the situation with Ed Buck. And he, at the time that he was being interviewed, him and his girlfriend were living in LA, but they still didn't have a home. But he, like, at least felt more secure knowing that he had, like, this stable relationship and was not, like, going to be part of Ed Buck's life anymore.
Well, I have a thought. This may just be an obvious thought, but it just seems like, I don't know, in these situations you always think, like, like why? Like how were you convinced to be there? And
Yeah.
like how, why, whatever. But it seems like from the start, Ed Buck like very much seems to like respect your boundaries. Like, you just want photos. We're just doing photos. You want to come do
you're
drugs?
straight. We don't have to have sex.
Yeah. You want to come do drugs, but you don't want to have sex? Cool. So I think like, yeah, it seems like these people were like, yeah, this guy's kind of creepy, but he's willing to only do what I'm comfortable with, so I'll just go, and I'll only go as far as I want to go.
Yeah.
And then...
And I think that, like, with, like, what Damar said about, like, ultimately, this is a weak man. Like, he's... Like, if you look at pictures of Ed Buck, he is, like, scrawny. He looks like he's on drugs. Like, he's... very, like, emaciated. He looks like a vegan on drugs.
Old
he's
man.
He's very thin. He's very short, even. He's older. And so, like, ultimately, I think that that is a big part of it.
Yeah.
And the fact that, like, these things that he was doing that, like, really, like, made me think, like, oh my god, like, this guy's a monster. Like, he was only doing when they were asleep. Like, he would put cock rings on them only when they were asleep. He would shoot them up with meth only when they were unconscious. And so, like, it's, like, very clear that, like, for him, like, he wants to see these things happening.
But he is a coward.
But, like, yeah, he knows he can't, like, put up a fight against these guys.
Yeah.
So he does it, like, the only way he can.
Yeah.
But yeah. And when we get to Gemmel's diary entries, like, it's really sad, but, like, you can kind of see where the, like, I guess the willingness to, like, interact with him comes into play, like, why it's so hard for them to get out of it.
Yeah.
But... So another survivor who goes by the name Brian in media explained that he met Ed Buck on the website Adam for Adam, and that website was noted by several other survivors that, like, he was on there a lot. And in Brian's story, he points out that Buck had already had an Adam for Adam account, and it had been reported and removed, and he just made another one.
Under the same name?
Account is how he met Brian. I don't think it was the same name.
Edward Buckmelter.
And I think that's, like, part of it is that he did not know that this was Ed Buck.
Okay.
So he confirmed that it was Ed Buck because it was his apartment. He said that, like, he told Jasmine Canick, like, this is the apartment code I used. She was like, yep, that's the code that the other guys talked about using. So, like, it definitely was Ed Buck, but he did not know that when he went to meet with him because he was using a fake account. So he, like, traveled to this suitor's house via Uber. So he didn't have his own car to get it back out. And then he got to the apartment, and that is when he realized that it was Ed Buck. They smoked crystal meth, and Brian was asked to model for Buck. He actually had brought his own drugs with him because they had, like, discussed this. But once he was there, Ed Buck was like, no, you can only use my drugs. And, like, so, like, you know, something's fishy is going on.
Yeah. No one's just offering up their own supply for no reason.
Yeah. He's like, but I want these drugs. He's like, no, you can't have them. And so then he, like, started to feel uncomfortable. And he was like, I would like to go now. And he said that, like, he was allowed to leave eventually, but that Buck was very persistent that he stay, and that, like, it was kind of like a verbal argument of, like, no, you need to stay. And he was like, no, I will not be staying. And he told Jasmine that, like, this was the only time he ever went to Ed Buck's house. And again, like, we have to keep in mind that, like, he did not know that that was Ed Buck's house until he got there and met him at the door. And but he said that after that, Ed Buck had reached out to him several times,
Never
trying
again.
to get him to come back, and he had not responded. So I'm talking about one more survivor, and then we're gonna get into the deaths of Buck's final victims. And, like, the more you listen to these survivor stories, the more you realize, like, these deaths were completely avoidable. Like, this man should have been stopped at this point, but he wasn't. So Brandon is this other survivor who was interviewed by Jasmine Canick, and he shared with her that he moved in with a boyfriend of his when he was 18 because of a rift between him and his mother over his sexuality and mannerisms. He said that his mother was in a relationship with a woman, but she was constantly telling Brandon that he needed to be more masculine.
Okay.
And he was like, okay.
Make it make sense.
What? And so he moved in with his boyfriend when he was 18. And then he met Gemmel Moore.
What?
I've mentioned Gemmel Moore a couple times because he is the first fatality caused by Ed Buck. But Brandon and Gemmel's stories cross over a little bit. So Brandon met Gemmel on the ballroom scene in Los Angeles, where Gemmel was participating and competing in drag balls. And in 2010, Brandon met Ed Buck on, you guessed it, Adam for Adam. And he confirmed the other stories that the survivors had told of the underwear, the party and play, the photos being taken in exchange for money. He also reported that there were hundreds of sexually explicit photos saved to Buck's computer of young black men.
First question, was this also a catfish? Like, was it also not Ed Buck's name in this scenario? Do we know?
Let's see, this was in 2010. I actually think this was one of the original profiles because Brian, I think the one I talked about before Brandon, was, I think, more recent.
Oh, okay.
In contact with Ed Buck, and this was in 2010.
Okay.
And this was before Gemmel Moore died, so I think this was an original profile.
Okay.
So I think he did know.
Okay.
But at this point, nobody had died, so
right.
I don't think that
it really
they knew. Oh, like, it didn't seem so bad.
Yeah. Okay.
So Brandon met with Buck a few more times, but every time he would, like, shy away from doing drugs. Like, he really did not want to do drugs, and he would, like, do a little bit to, like, but not, like, any of the narcotics that Buck was offering. And so finally Buck told him, he was like, if you're not going to party, I don't want you around here. And so Brandon was like, cool beans. He did end up giving Buck the phone number of a friend of his. I don't know exactly who that friend is, but he did not ever go back.
Why did Ed Buck let someone onto his computer? Or did he know?
I think he was, like, stupid, actually. Like,
yeah.
Like, some of these things, like,
he's not even a good criminal.
The amount of photos and videos of this man doing these things, like he had to be dumb or something, because
what the hell?
Like, how are you letting people take pictures of you?
Yeah, and even, like, if not for evidence purposes, you want this guy to stay with you, but he's looking at hundreds of other people. Now he's terrified. You don't think maybe he shouldn't see that?
Part of it, I think, is, like, that there's like levels of trust that
Yeah.
they were allowed to get to with him, because like some of them would report that like they never saw past the kitchen,
Okay.
or like they that like the kitchen itself was blocked off, or like things. And so like I don't know if like there were just some of them that he like trusted more than others. But yeah, I think that there's just some level of like
Dumb.
recklessness.
Yeah.
But good news is in 2012, Brandon was able to turn his life around. At the time that he was interviewed by Jasmine Canick, he had a long-term boyfriend. He had been working on his education and was pursuing a career as a fashion designer. He was also a very strong advocate of spreading awareness about HIV in his community. He was one of the many young black gay men that Ed Buck took advantage of during the low points of their lives when they really needed support. But like luckily Brandon was able to come out of that scene and find success for himself. Ed Buck, on the other hand, just continued like preying on anyone he could find. And it really seemed like nothing could stop him from this. Like he continued like hosting parties, administering drugs, abusing men. People were beginning to overdose in his apartment. Like not just the people who died. Like some people overdosed, went to the hospital, survived, and like he still wouldn't stop doing it. And then 2 men died in his apartment due to like his recklessness and negligence, and he still hosted these parties.
And no one's concerned that people are showing up with overdoses with this same old white man
Yes.
and thinking not maybe that he's like murdering people, but not thinking like drugs are illegal, dude. What are y'all doing?
Yeah.
And why is it always you?
I put like a comment about that at the end, but like he really took advantage of a system that demonizes black men and assumes that they are doing drugs. And he let that work in his favor.
Yeah.
But yeah, so okay. When Gemmel Moore was 26 years old, he was found dead of a crystal meth overdose in the home of Ed Buck in July of 2017. According to the Justice for Gemmel website, he was found naked on a mattress in Buck's living room while a pornographic movie was still playing on the TV in front of him. The coroner found 24 syringes with brown residue, 5 glass pipes with white residue and burn marks, a plastic straw with white residue, clear plastic bags filled with white powdery residue, and 1 clear plastic bag with a crystal-like substance inside. Gemmel's death was ruled an accidental methamphetamine overdose. But 19 days later, his journal was found. And it contained some damning evidence that he did not overdose on his own, and that this was not an accident. So
the journal is found in Ed Buck's house?
Yes.
Okay.
It's really sad to hear, but some of the journal entries said, "My life is at an all-time high right now, and I mean that from all ways. I ended up back at Buck's house again and got manipulated into slamming again. I even went to the point where I was forced to doing 4 within a 2-day period. This man is crazy and it's sad. Will I ever get help? I honestly don't know what to do. I've become addicted to drugs, and the worst one at that. Ed Buck is the one to thank. He gave me my first injection of crystal meth. It was very painful, but after all the troubles, Ike became addicted to the pain and fetish fantasy." If it didn't hurt so bad, I'd kill myself, but I'll let Ed Buck do it for now. I know.
How sad.
Yeah.
So does that mean that there was like an actual investigation throughout his house? Like if they found this, I mean, I know what's coming next, but like
I think that the search that took place in his house was really just for drugs, and I think that the idea was like, well, Ed Buck did not overdose from methamphetamine.
Yeah.
Gemmel Moore did, so these must be his drugs.
Yeah.
And I think that the journal was just
happened.
They found.
Okay.
Yeah. Although
19 days later.
And maybe it wasn't found by police though, because after it was found, they posted it online.
Yeah, because, I mean, 19 days later, like, the police, if they're going back 19 days later, you would not think there's going to be another fatality.
So it must have been, like,
another survivor found it?
Or, like, something that, like, he didn't have there.
Oh.
Like, a family member found or something.
Maybe.
But yeah. After the journal was published, several other young black gay men came forward to disclose their own experiences with Buck. They offered photos, emails, and text messages as evidence to the police. They accused him of being a sexual predator, kidnapping, forcing drug use, filing false police reports, coercion, pimping, and pandering. But despite all of this, prosecutors said they would not be filing charges due to insufficient evidence. And for Ed Buck, that was a green light to just continue his abuse. He did not slow down at all with what he was doing. And ultimately, that would lead to another death. So, Timothy Dean moved to California in 2002 and graduated with a degree from Santa Monica College in 2015. He lived in WeHo, where he enjoyed being a part of the Lambda Basketball League and was co-captain of the LA Heat. He was inducted into the Gay Basketball Hall of Fame in 2001.
Cute.
In 2018, he played what would be his final basketball game at the Paris Gay Games, and he took home a silver medal in the men's 35-plus division. Timothy was a fashion consultant at Bloomingdale's and at Saks Fifth Avenue in Beverly Hills, where he was very successful and became one of their top salespeople. According to the Justice for Gemmel website, he was known for his love of fashion and food and took pride in his appearance. I also think it's interesting, before I get into like what happened, he's very different from the other victims. He was 55.
Wow.
When he died. He had 2 successful steady jobs. And in the Beyond Ed Buck documentary, they interview his best friend, and his best friend like points out that like they were all warned, like, do not hang out with this man. And that like, but the men who were having problems with like substance abuse, like, just did continue to go to him.
And the people that needed money, you know.
And like, he said that like it was he like pointed out that like Timothy had a history with drug use, but had been clean. And the friend like found out about it because like he had told him like, I'm struggling with this, and Timothy was like, me too, like I totally understand what you're going through, and like we're gonna get through this together. And so like I think that this was just something that they didn't know he was going through again. But in January of 2019, Timothy Dean, 55, was found dead of an apparent methamphetamine overdose in the apartment of Ed Buck. Police investigations showed that the drugs were injected intravenously and that Ed Buck waited 15 minutes after Timothy had overdosed before calling the police.
Thank you, guys.
After Timothy Dean was killed, a coalition of 50 civil rights organizations released a statement that called for local law enforcement to investigate Buck's role in Timothy's death, and they asked them to ensure that all monetary contributions that government officials had received from Ed Buck be returned.
Okay.
My question with that is, like, returned to him?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I'm not trying to be whatever, but, like, why?
Yeah.
Like, money that he has given away.
Yeah, I think
shouldn't matter, I guess.
Like, the idea was, like, to show, like, oh,
we don't want your money.
Yeah, we don't want his money. But,
yeah.
like, then does he get it?
Yeah.
Or, like,
can it just go in the garbage?
Yeah.
Go to the survivors?
Yeah. In September of 2019, Ed Buck was charged with 3 counts of battery, causing serious injury, and administering meth and maintaining a drug house. According to officials, he had injected a 37-year-old man from Wisconsin with methamphetamine, causing him to overdose, but luckily survive just 6 days prior to Buck being charged. So this is the guy I was talking about in the beginning. It's like the final survivor. He wants to be referred to as a doe for his privacy, but this was like the one that they were like, okay, shit, like he won't stop doing this.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 days later, an additional charge of 1 count of distribution of methamphetamine resulting in death for the murder of Gemmel Moore was added on. In August of 2020, a federal grand jury tacked on 4 additional felony charges, totaling 9 counts. And he was supposed to go to trial in January of 2021, but it was postponed to April of the same year due to COVID.
Yay.
Yeah. On July 27th, 2021, Ed Buck was found guilty of all 9 charges, including the deaths of Gemmel Moore and Timothy Dean, maintaining a drug den, distributing methamphetamines, and solicitation of prostitution. On April 14th of 2022, he was sentenced to 30 years in prison.
The good news is that he's very old.
Yeah.
But that's some bullshit.
Yeah, it's not enough at all.
Mm-mm.
Ultimately, Ed Buck was able to use his money, status, and notoriety to prey on vulnerable members of the LGBT community, many of whom were suffering from addiction, were without homes, and had nowhere else to turn. He used his political activism to hide himself as a caring, proud, helpful gay man, looking to donate to the institutions we hope will bring change. He utilized a system that demonizes Black men and doesn't question if they die from drug usage to his advantage, and he got away with it for years, causing more damage than he ever should have. And my sources, because you can't go without citing sources, were the Ed Buck Wikipedia page, a justice.gov article by Ciaran McAvoy, a Daily Mail article by Louise Boyle, an LA Times article by Richard Winton, the Beyond Ed Buck documentary, our dear friend Anthony, justiceforjamel.org, and IamJasmine.com, where all of the Jasmine Canick articles came from.
Nice. Nicely done. Yeah. Horrific. I didn't know any of this. I mean, I also didn't know Ed Buck, like, either. Like, I don't know who he is.
I knew, like, of him, and that he was, like, a bad person. The people died on his watch.
Yeah.
But, like, the details are, like, so horrifying.
Yeah.
Like, and the fact that, like, it really was, like, avoidable.
Mm-hmm.
If on Jasmine's website, she posts all of the photos and videos that I talked about. They're also included in the Beyond Ed Buck documentary. So
where can people watch that?
I think you can, like, purchase it.
Is
or
that
rent it?
Did you do that?
No.
Where did you watch it?
If you have Roku, it's on the All Black channel.
Okay.
Of Roku. But it does require a subscription.
Well, gross. Yeah, definitely more than 30 years for holding captive and causing the death of many, many, many people. Well, not the deaths of many people, but holding captive many, many, many people. But yeah, that's the world we live in.
Mm-hmm. And also on the Justice for Gemmel website, you can see, like, photographs of Gemmel Moore and Timothy Dean, and, like, Gemmel's family runs that website. And they have put up, like, really good memorials for both of them. But yeah, they just, like, in, like, all the pictures of those two, like, you can just tell they had a lot in front of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Timothy Dean, what a strange deviation, though.
Yeah.
But
and even, like, the doe in the end, he was 37.
Yeah. Well, with Timothy Dean, do we think that it was more of like the trick was like we're like addicts and we're gonna like help each other, so like come over, like that's what the bond was?
I think that it was like portrayed as more of a like real friendship.
Yeah.
Than like prostitution.
Yeah. Or like predatory.
Yeah.
Initially. Yeah.
Like I don't even know that if I'm assuming he paid Timothy Dean, but I don't really know if he did or not, because he may not have felt the need to. Because like we said, like he would change the payment amount depending on who it was. So maybe he was like, you just come do drugs with me.
Yeah. Maybe. Well, thank you for that, Mary.
Yeah. Your turn next.
Yeah, I'll be doing it next. I think I know what I want to do, but I haven't decided. So we'll see. Okay. I'll try to keep it to one part, whatever I do. But alrighty. Well, we'll be back with more true crime, whatever it is I decide, next Friday. So talk to you all again in a week. And go visit Justice for Gemmel website. And look into this.
Yeah.
And help Ed Buck burn, I guess. Yeah. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.